Have you ever looked at your life and felt that the obstacles in front of you were simply too large, that the distance between where you are and where you want to be was not just difficult, but impossible? Have you ever sat quietly with a dream you were afraid to say out loud, because somewhere inside you had already decided that someone like you could not have it? If you have felt that, even once, even for a single dark moment, then what I am about to tell you is for you. There is a particular kind of giving up that no one talks about. It does not happen all at once. It does not announce itself. It happens slowly, in small surrenders. The application you decided not to send, the conversation you decided not to start, the door you walked past because you were certain, before you even knocked, that it would not open for you. And each small surrender feels reasonable. Each one has a perfectly good explanation, and that is exactly what makes it so dangerous. Today I want to tell you the story of a young man who had every reason the world would accept to stop. Every reason. And he didn't. Stay with me until the very end, because what he discovered in the final chapter of his struggle is not what you are expecting, and it will change the way you see every limitation in your own life from this moment forward. There is a city where the school bell rings at the same hour every morning, where the smell of chalk dust and jasmine tea fills the corridors before the first lesson begins, and where the sound of 100 children's voices rises and falls like a tide from 7 in the morning until the last bell releases them into the golden afternoon. It is an ordinary city, the kind that does not make it onto maps of important places, the kind where ordinary things happen to ordinary people, day after day, year after year. It was in this city that a boy named Rohan grew up. He was 17 years old when this story truly begins, though the thing that shaped him had happened much earlier at the age of 4, from an illness that the doctors had done everything they could to prevent, and could not. By the time Rohan started school, the world had already rearranged itself for him. Not into darkness. Exactly, he could sense light, could feel the warmth of the sun when it came through a window, could tell morning from afternoon by the quality of the air. But the sharp-edged world of faces and letters and distant things was closed to him in a way that no amount of wanting could open. His mother had decided, from the very first day, that this would not be the end of anything. She read to him every evening, not just stories, but everything. The newspaper, the backs of seed packets in the garden, letters from relatives in distant towns. She read the way some people breathe, as if stopping would cost her something essential. And Rohan learned to listen the way some people see, with complete attention, noticing things in a voice that other people missed entirely. He could tell when his teacher was tired by the slight flattening of her vowels. He could tell when a classmate was lying by the half-second pause before the answer. He moved through the school the way water moves, finding the path that existed rather than the one he wished for, and moving through it without complaint. But he was not without complaint inside. He was 17, and 17 is not a gentle age for anyone. His classmates were preparing for the university entrance examinations, the great sorting that would determine, or so everyone believed, what kind of life each of them would be permitted to live. They studied with textbooks spread open on their desks, marking passages in different colors, drawing diagrams in the margins. And Rohan sat beside them with his braille materials and his recording device, and told himself, morning after morning, that he was keeping up. He was keeping up. That was true. But keeping up was not what he wanted. What Rohan wanted was to study medicine, to become a doctor. When he first said this to his school counselor, a soft-spoken man named Mr. Verma, who genuinely wanted the best for his students and genuinely did not believe this was possible, Mr. Verma had been very careful with his words. He had said that there were many wonderful paths for a young man of Rohan's abilities. He had mentioned several of them, all reasonable, all respectable, all safe. He had not said the word impossible, but Rohan heard it in the spaces between every sentence, the way he heard everything completely. There was a boy in Rohan's class named Dev. Dev was everything. Rohan was not in the way the world measured these things, top of the examination rankings, confident, the kind of student whose name teachers said with a particular warmth, whose future seemed to arrive fully formed before him. Dev was not unkind. He simply could not conceal a particular kind of pity, the pity that comes not from cruelty, but from imagination failure, from a sincere inability to picture a different kind of life working. One afternoon, after a study session in the library, Dev had said, "You know, Rohan, you are the smartest person in this room." And Rohan had said nothing, because he understood exactly what came after the but that Dev did not say. He walked home that evening through streets he knew by sound and texture and memory. The broken tile outside the tailor's shop, the place where the road dipped slightly before the post office. The dog that always barked at the corner of the second lane and then immediately wagged its tail. He walked home and sat at the kitchen table while his mother prepared dinner, and he was quiet for so long that she eventually put down the ladle and came to sit beside him. She did not ask what was wrong. She waited. He said, "Maybe they're right." She said, "Who is right about what?" He said, "Everyone. Maybe medicine is not for someone like me." His mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said something she had never said in quite this way before. She said, "Rohan, the door has never once told the river where it can flow." He did not fully understand this then, but he would remember it. That night, he did something he rarely allowed himself to do. He stopped studying. He simply lay on his back on his bed and let himself feel the full weight of what he was carrying. The examinations were 4 months away. The application process was already underway. He had written to 3 medical colleges asking about accommodations for visually impaired students. 2 had not replied. 1 had replied with a letter so full of regret and careful language that it amounted to a very politely worded wall. Think about that for a moment. Have you ever reached toward something and had the world reach back at you with a very polite, very reasonable explanation of why you should not have it? Did you believe that explanation? Did you let it settle in and make itself at home? What Rohan did not know, lying on that bed in the dark, was that the answer to his first letter was already sitting in a pile of unopened posts at the college office of a man named Professor Anand. It had been sitting there for 11 days. The professor was not an easy man to describe. He was in his late 60s, compact, moved with the deliberate economy of someone who had learned long ago not to waste motion. He had been teaching physiology for 40 years, had written 3 textbooks, and had long since passed the age when institutional politics interested him in the least. He had also, at the age of 32, survived an accident that had left him with significant hearing loss in both ears, and he had gone on to teach, to research, to publish, and to become one of the most respected medical educators in the country. He had not done this by accepting other people's definitions of what was possible for him. He read Rohan's letter on a Tuesday morning, drank his tea, read it again, and then picked up the telephone. The conversation was brief. Professor Anand asked Rohan 3 questions, not about his disability, not about his accommodations, not about the practical difficulties. He asked, "Why medicine?" He asked, "What do you know about the field that you believe you do not yet know?" And he asked, "When things become very hard, what do you do?" Rohan answered all 3 questions honestly, including the last one, where he said, "I sit with it. I try not to pretend it is smaller than it is, and then I keep going." Professor Anand said, "Come and meet me." The meeting happened 3 weeks later. Rohan took a bus for 4 hours to reach the college, and his mother came with him, and they sat in Professor Anand's office, which smelled of old books and cardamom and the faint chemical edge of a nearby laboratory. The professor spoke to Rohan's mother for exactly 2 minutes, thanked her for coming, and then said, "I would like to speak with your son alone if you do not mind." She minded a little, but she went. What Professor Anand said to Rohan over the next hour was not a speech. It was a conversation, the first conversation Rohan had ever had with someone who spoke to him about medicine, not as a dream to be managed, but as a subject to be explored. They talked about the auditory dimensions of diagnosis, about the extraordinary sensitivity and touch that experienced clinicians develop, about the stethoscope and what it can tell you when you are truly listening. They talked about the ways in which the absence of one sense sharpens the others, and how that sharpening, in the right hands and with the right training, could become a clinical tool rather than a clinical problem. At the end of the hour, the professor said, "I believe you can do this. I also believe it will be the hardest thing you have ever attempted. I am not going to tell you it will be straightforward because it will not be. But I will tell you this. The door has never once told the river where it can flow." Rohan went very still. He said, "My mother said those exact words." The professor nodded and said, "Then she is a wise woman. It is an old saying, but most old sayings are old because they are true." Remember the question we began with today, whether you had decided, before you even knocked, that the door would not open for you? Hold that memory close, because what happened in the months that followed is where the answer lives. The examination period was the hardest stretch of Rohan's life up to that point. He studied with the assistance of a reader, a college student named Priya, who came every evening and read his textbooks aloud, with a patience and precision that Rohan later said was one of the great gifts anyone had ever given him. He memorized in a way that most students never have to, entirely through listening, through repetition, through building interior architecture so detailed and solid that he could walk through it in his mind the way other students walk through written notes. There were nights when Priya left and the house was quiet and Rohan sat at the kitchen table with the weight of the following day pressing down on him like something physical. There were mornings when he woke at 4 and lay in the dark thinking about all the people who had said reasonable things in reasonable voices and who were almost certainly correct. On one of those mornings, 3 weeks before the examinations, he knocked a cup of tea from the table and it shattered on the tile floor. And he sat there for a moment and then put his face in his hands, not weeping exactly, but very close to it. His mother came in. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she sat down beside him and took one of his hands in both of hers. And she said, "The door has never once told the river where it can flow." He sat up. He took a breath. He kept going. The examinations themselves were an experience he later described as existing in a kind of pure sound. The scratch of his braille stylus on the paper, the faint breathing of the other students around him, the clock on the wall that he could track by ear, the proctor's footsteps moving in a regular, reassuring pattern. He answered every question. He did not finish early. He sat until the last minute and checked his work by running his fingers over what he had written, reading himself back to himself one last time. He did not know, walking out of that room, whether he had passed. He would not know for weeks. And those weeks were among the most suspended of his life. Not painful exactly, but airless, the way the world goes airless in the moment before a storm breaks one way or the other. And then the results came. He had passed. Not merely passed, he had scored in the top 12% of all candidates in the country. When Professor Anand called to tell him, he was standing in the kitchen and his mother was at the counter behind him, and when he turned around after the call ended, his face told her everything before he said a single word. And she held him for a long time, and neither of them spoke. But the story does not end there, because passing the examination was one door, and behind it were 10 more. The admission process to the College of Medicine required interviews, and the interview committee had questions, careful, reasonable, well-intentioned questions about practicality and patient safety and clinical rotations. Rohan answered each one. Professor Anand was in the room for every interview, not speaking, simply present, which was itself a kind of statement. There was one committee member, a senior administrator, a woman who was not unsympathetic, who genuinely believed she was asking the right questions, who said, "But how will you read a patient's chart? How will you examine someone without the full visual picture?" Rohan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I will listen to them the way I have listened to everything in my life. I will hear what the chart cannot say. I will feel what other hands might miss. And I will build a practice around the things I can do extraordinarily well, rather than spending it mourning the things I cannot." The room was quiet. Professor Anand, who had said he would not speak, said, "I have been in medical education for 40 years. That answer is the best answer to that question I have ever heard. Now I want to speak to you directly. Perhaps you have never been blind. Perhaps your limitation looks nothing like Rohan's. Perhaps it is a background you did not choose, a past that still speaks when you are trying to move forward, a diagnosis that rearranged the life you had planned, a fear that lives in your chest and has been there so long you have begun to think it is part of your structure. Perhaps you once wanted something very much, and someone who seemed to know things, a teacher, a parent, a counselor, a voice inside your own head told you, carefully, that it was not for someone like you. And perhaps you believed them. Perhaps you are still believing them right now. Here is what I want you to carry from this story. First, the people who tell you what is impossible for you are almost always telling you what is impossible for them. They are not lying. They simply cannot see what you are capable of because they have never had to become it. Mr. Verma was not a cruel man. Dev was not a bad person. They simply could not picture a world that had not yet existed. Your job is not to convince them. Your job is to build that world until it is standing in front of them. Second, The limitations that feel most permanent are often the ones that force you to find the capability that would never have developed any other way. Rohan's listening was not a consolation prize for his sight. It was a different and extraordinary instrument. The thing that the world told him was his wound turned out to be a significant part of his strength. This is not always true, and I will not insult you by pretending it always is. But it is true often enough that it deserves to be held in mind every time you are looking at something you cannot change. Third, keeping going is not the same as pretending it is not hard. Rohan sat on that bed in the dark. He put his face in his hands over a broken cup of tea. He did not perform strength. He felt the weight of his situation honestly, and then he kept going anyway. That is the only kind of courage that is real, the kind that knows exactly what it is facing. The door has never once told the river where it can flow. I want to ask you something now, and I hope you will be honest with yourself when you answer. Think of the door you have not yet knocked on, the application you have not yet sent, the conversation you have been afraid to start, the dream you carry quietly, the one you do not say out loud because the reasonable voices are too loud. What would it look like to take one step toward that door today? Not to open it, not to break it down, just to walk closer and let yourself stand in front of it. Write that in the comments if you are willing. Not the whole story, just the door, just the one thing you have been walking past. Because someone reading your words tonight may need to know that they are not the only one standing in that hallway. If you know someone who is carrying this right now, someone whose dream has been filed away under reasonable explanations, send them this story, not with a message attached. Just send it. Let it do the work that words between people sometimes cannot do. And if you find something here that steadies you, if these stories have ever reminded you of something you knew but had forgotten, then stay close. Every story shared in this place is built for one reason: to remind you that the limitations you are carrying right now are not the final word. The river has never once asked the door for permission.